Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the beautiful Sport Optics studio. I am your host, Jayse, and today we're going to be getting into something that's pretty straightforward, relatively simple, but it comes up in conversations with customers basically daily, and that is illuminated, non-illuminated. Do you need it? Pros, cons, why you might want one or the other, and we're going to go over all of that today. So sit back, relax, fix yourself a cup of coffee. If you learned something today, make sure to like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And if you don't, still make sure to like, share, subscribe. Let's get into it. As you can see, I have in front of me two scopes, and at a glance, they are essentially identical minus one or two small things. And what that essentially is going to come down to is one has an illuminated reticle, one has a non-illuminated reticle. And why I chose these two scopes specifically, which by the way, these are Z5i pluses and a Z5 plus from Swarovski. And the cool thing about this line in particular is for every scope in the line, they make a illuminated and a non-illuminated version, which is a little bit uncommon these days. There are some brands that still kind of do it, Leupold being one of them, and maybe a couple others, but none quite as extensively as the Swarovskis in the Z5 line. So, what is illumination? Well, I'm going to tell you. What that essentially means is whether it be through fiber optics or some sort of other technology. I'm not going to get into the minutia of that because, frankly, I don't know the exact specifics. But what essentially you're going to see when you look through the scope and you have the illumination turned on is a tiny illuminated red dot. Now, in other scopes, they may go as far as to being a crosshair. The whole reticle might be illuminated. Just depending on the reticle itself, you may see different variations of what is actually illuminated. But for these specifically, you get a nice, fine, crisp, illuminated red dot. And what that essentially is going to help you do is in certain situations, mainly like low light situations. Now, and of course, we're talking hunting specifically. So a low light situation, you're, dawn, dusk, whatever it may be, you have that black reticle and maybe it's getting washed out against a darker background, or maybe even the fur of an animal, whatever it may be, that illuminated dot or that illuminated point is going to essentially make your reticle kind of pop a little bit. It's going to help it stand out. So instead of fighting, looking for your center point of aim, hey, I know I just need to put that dot where I want to hit, boom, and I'm good to go. So of course it wouldn't be a fair, overview without mentioning any sort of cons. And to be perfectly honest, the cons are pretty few and far between with an illuminated scope, but hey, there are some, so we're of course going to mention them. Now, the biggest one is going to come in the form of cost. Obviously that's a big factor, totally understandable. It would be for me. Generally, everything else being equal, like within these two scopes in front of me, the illuminated option is going to be a little more expensive. That illumination feature is going to come at a little more of a premium. You're getting, obviously a little more technology, a little bit more going into the scope. So obviously with that comes a little bit added cost. It's usually not anything huge, maybe $100, maybe a little more. Some options, depending on the brand and the specifics of the scope, maybe it's a little bit more of an added cost, but generally speaking, it's not a crazy added cost for illumination features. And of course, another thing to mention would be, since it is, an electronic feature, that means it is dependent on a power source, i.e. batteries. So sure, batteries are cheap, but hey, if you're pinching pennies, that is another potential cost to consider, an extra part you would need to make sure to keep on hand. But with that being said, also, if you run out of batteries, if you forget extra batteries, the battery fails or something, you still essentially still have a non-illuminated scope at that point. You still have a nice etched reticle that's still going to be plenty usable. You just, wouldn't be able to use that illuminated feature. And really, that's pretty much about it when it comes to cons. Again, cost and reliability on a battery, which at the end of the day, hey, you be the determining factor how much that matters to you. I hear some people mention extra weight, but there's really no discernible weight increase in an illuminated scope. I'm talking like a fraction of an ounce, so nothing to really even consider. And that's like I said, that's really about it. There's still plenty of reasons to, if you want to have just a non-illuminated scope. For example, if you're only shooting in daylight conditions, you're not doing any kind of shooting in super low light or anything like that, a non-illuminated scope is still fantastic and will be plenty enough to suffice. For example, myself, I'll use myself an example. I've hunted most of my life up until the last few years with a non-illuminated scope and have been fine in most situations. Anytime I'm shooting, and I know we're talking specifically hunting, but just as another point of reference for any type of like competitive shooting. Competition shooting is done during the day. You're not really going to benefit from a illuminated reticle in ideal lighting conditions. So non-illuminated scopes still a super viable option depending on you and your needs, but again, illumination is just super nice to have in the situations where they're going to help you out. So bringing it back to the scopes themselves, again, we've talked about the Swarovski specifically. I mentioned Leupold earlier. They do have some options. You'll see like fire dot, and then their non-illuminated option would be like the duplex. And really most other brands, Vortex, like Collis, Burris, you name it really these days are going to have both illuminated and non-illuminated options. And most I would say these days are even starting to skew towards having predominantly illuminated options, which, hey, that's perfectly fine. You know how technology works. As time goes on, the cost of things go down, so you can get illuminated options in scopes these days without having to spend a whole lot of money, as in where used to illumination was was exclusive to the super high-end stuff. So if you have any questions about anything I've talked about so far or anything else in regards to the thousands of products we offer at SportOptics.com, please check out the website. It's very intuitive, and if you need further assistance or to discuss pricing or literally anything, that's what I'm here for. Make sure to call, email, comment, all that fun stuff. I'm happy to talk to you at length, and we're going to get you squared away in exactly what works for you. And with all that being said, I think that kind of wraps us up for today. Again, I know it's kind of a short one. It's a relatively simple concept, but again, something that we need to talk about because it comes up and it's very important. So again, thanks for being here. Sincerely appreciate your time. I hope you enjoyed yourself. Hope you learned something. Again, make sure to like, subscribe, share, all that fun stuff. It helps us out a ton. And we'll see you on the next one. God bless.